Alright, today's video we're going to replace the carburetor on a Husqvarna 125B leaf blower. And what's going on here is, instead of just overhauling the carburetor and soaking it and spraying it and replacing the gaskets and whatnot, we're just going to do a carburetor replacement. And the reason for that is because that's what the shop is going to do. They're not going to waste a whole bunch of time to overhaul a carburetor just to find out that it's something else or that it failed or whatnot. They're just going to out and out replace it. And that is what we're going to do. We are going to replace the carburetor in its entirety. Just swap it in, swap it out. And the reason for that, this is like 20 bucks. I think I paid $19.99 on Amazon. Got free delivery, Prime, all that good stuff. Came with gaskets. Came with new fuel line, couple of gaskets, a filter, a primer, you know, all that good stuff for 20 bucks. Or you could probably buy a rebuild kit for 10. I think they're 10 or $15. And, you know, take it all apart, replace the gasket, do all that stuff, soak it or spray it. And it has this plastic lever you got to deal with. If you use harsh chemicals, it may soften it. So, you know, all in all, it's just worth buying the carburetor and swapping it out. So how do I know it's a carburetor? Well, first of all, I checked the air filter, and it's only a little dirty. It's not completely clogged. So that's one thing. Yeah, it's dirty, but you know, it's fine. I am going to replace it though. And the other thing is, when it runs, all right, you put it on full choke, you prime the bulb, you pull it, it sputters a little bit, then you put it to position 2, pull it, it should start up first pull. Then you let it run like that for a little while, then you turn the choke off and it runs full blast, normal, no problems. Well, when you have to start fiddling with the lever to get it to run at full speed, and let's say you're feathering the throttle, trying to keep it at full speed, and you're messing with it, well, you know, that's not right. So the carburetor is getting clogged up, or who knows what's wrong. Could be dirt, even though you have a filter on it. Could be just gummed up. Who knows? So let's start taking it apart. Alright, I took the gas out. There's, you know, whatever's in the tank, just a few drops, whatever didn't pour out. But your first fun thing is getting these screws out. You know, are they standard? Are they metric? They're in there pretty deep, you know, you need a deep well, nut driver, something. So let's see what we can do. So it looks like both the 5/16 and 8mm will work equally well. There's not too much slop in one or the other where it won't break it loose or round it off or anything like that. So let's take it out. Oh yeah, watch out for dropping the screws. That's always a fun thing to find out where they ran off to. Alright, just to make it official for the record, they measured 5/16 exactly, which is 7.9mm. So, as I suspected, they used standard hardware. Next we'll take the bulb out. You can see there's a little tab right there, and then the fuel lines are covering the other side. Yeah, they're just covering the other side, sorry. So you just get some needle nose pliers and squeeze a little bit, and the bulb will pop right out. And I know I was really zoomed in there, so hopefully we got it, but it worked like I described it earlier. And we have our air filter housing, our bulb all free, and there is the carburetor. Just as a little side note, over the years for weed eaters, I know this is a leaf blower, but I've seen the fuel lines become very brittle and they will break at this connection right here. Now there's a rubber grommet going into the tank, but sometimes there's a metal tube. Anyway, this is really stiff and solid. I don't see any breaks or kinks, but a lot of times that'll happen. So they gave us new fuel line. I'm going to install new fuel line. So with a little combination of my screwdriver and pliers, I kind of pulled this out. I didn't want to tear it or damage it, so I wanted to just get it out of the way. Okay, with everything all freed up, the last thing I'm going to disconnect is the linkage, and I'll show you how that's done. Okay, I have my 5/32 T-handle. Just break this loose here. This metal bar is a ground. You'll see that connected in there too. Alright, so you have two choices. You can just take out these 3 screws and spread it enough to get the latch out, the lever, throttle lever, and the grounding bar out, and then carefully, put it back together by spreading it. Or you can take all of the screws out and just remove the side, and it's actually a whole lot easier. There are 2 different screws. One you see is a plastic screw, and the other one is like a metal screw. As you can see, there are 4 that go into metal and 3 that go into plastic. And the way you can tell them apart is the 4 finer thread metal screws hold on the starter pull starter. Alright, with that, the carburetor should just come right out. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. The other thing you want to remember is how all the lines are run, so that when you replace them, you'll know where they go. You can do that one at a time, which is what I'm going to do, or you can do it all at once. Little trick I used to learn before the days of video and whatnot is to take a picture of everything. So I used to have a digital camera, and I just took pictures of everything, so I knew how it would go back together if I had to reference it. So the gaskets are a little different. They're kind of square, where the originals are kind of oval, so whatnot. But the main thing is one of the gaskets has a center hole, and you want to make sure it lines up that way. Now what you see here is the original factory gasket. Has 2 holes in it, so the technician can just slap it on there and not have to worry about it. However, our replacement part, we do have to worry about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out which way it orients. So as you can see, there's your vacuum path, and the gasket is only going to go on one way to allow it to be in that path. That'll let you know that that is the engine source of the vacuum, and then it's going to come up to the carburetor there. Because if you try and flip it around, you'll see that it's not in an area where the vacuum path is molded into the block there. So I'm going to wipe that down, clean it up a little bit, put the gasket on, and then I'll slide the new carburetor back on. So we'll fit the new gasket in place here. Well, that didn't work, so it must be the other hole. go. And we're over top of the vacuum path, and the gasket will plug up everything except the source hole for the carburetor. Now I'm going to replace all the fuel lines on the new carburetor. Alright, so I'm going to do the bulb first. It looks like the bulb is going to draw fuel through the carburetor into the bulb and then dump it back into the tank. So this line was really stuck on there, and the way I've found is not to pull them, but to push them off. And usually that works a whole lot better. So I have my first piece of line. I'm going to cut it to length, and that's going to go from this tubing right here. Put it on pretty far like the original, and then it's going to go to the short stem of the bulb. Does it make a difference? I don't think so, but I'm going to assemble it exactly the way it was. Alright, I'm going to continue on until it's all put together. So I noticed on the outside gasket that the air filter housing bolts to, there was a hole in this gasket too. However, when I removed the original gasket, it just exposed a little area here where the choke is located. So if you want, you can put the hole there. I don't know if you want to drop of oil on there every once in a while or not. I don't know. I'm sure I'd never do that. So this gasket can go on either way. So, but I'll probably be assembling it this way just because, I don't know. I'm anal that way, I guess. I don't know. Alright, with all the new fuel lines hooked up, ready to go, I'm going to replug the tank. I'm going to feed this into the filter and the vent into the tank and set that in place. Alright, you're going to need your wiring hooked up correctly so that it touches your ground bar here. And then your switch, your trigger, is going to work like this. You pull your trigger. So the curved end goes to your throttle trigger, and then your kinked end goes to your carburetor. So that should be easy enough to remember. You can just feed it in like that, like that, in case you forget. Remember, you can always take a picture before you pull it apart. And now you want to make sure when you put the cover back on that none of this disconnects. So one thing I recommend is temporarily bolting down your carburetor. That'll kind of lock things in place, and you really only need one of the screws. So I'll just hold this guy in place here. So really the only thing you should have to worry about is your kill switch, to make sure your kill switch is oriented correctly. Of course, I just messed up there. So we'll just put this cover back on. So I needed it to feed in over top of this front spark arrestor here. So once I've fed it in correctly, it just slid right over the spark plug. So let's make sure everything is in its place here. It kind of clicks into place. You don't have to line it up. So the top's nice and snug. The bottom is held in place by the pull starter. So we'll get the top 3 screws started. And remember, they are the plastic screws, meaning the screws are made of metal, but there's a very coarse thread to bite into the plastic. And then a trick I learned long ago was to start all your screws before you tighten any of them down, because if you have something misaligned and one of the screws is very tight, you're not going to get it realigned. So tighten down your 3 screws that go into the plastic, and then the 4 screws that go onto the pull starter. You can see they're separate from the plastic housing, so you can do those separately. However, start all 4 before you tighten down any one. So this, of course, is idiot proof in that it's not symmetrical, so you can't put it on upside down. I'll get the other 3 started. Alright, now we go back to the original repair, which is the carburetor. We'll finish it up. Housing on there, I've got to take my temporary nut off. Then I will fit the housing on there, put the choke through the little slot here, get everything all fitted up, get the bulb in place correctly. It's going to snap in. Do it like that and then snap it in. And I'm going to get everything lined up and button it up. So I do have one tip when I was fitting everything in place, and that was the fuel line went behind the carburetor and prevented it from going back in all the way. So that got that oriented correctly, and we'll put the gasket on. Like I said, that hole in that gasket going to the hole where the linkage is connected, that linkage pin, is not really important. So we will get this guy back on here. Make sure it feeds through correctly. Get my, there's plenty of fuel line. Again, this just snaps into place. We'll bolt it down. Alright, I think we are done, except for air filter, air filter housing cover, and the test to make sure that it actually runs. So for this video, I'm going to say it did. Thank you for watching.